Welcome to the Studio Soundtrack. In this episode, Marina sits down with Charles Fowler, artist, musician, and project coordinator at Pasaquan. Charles shares his rich background in the realms of art and music, recounting his formative years at Columbus State University. Delving into his artistic journey, he illuminates his creative processes and the inspirations that fuel his work. Charles narrates the path that led him to begin working at Pasaquan, and he depicts the essence and allure of Pasaquan itself. We hope you enjoy this episode.
So we went to school together.
Yes.
And I was reading an interview that you did, and you mentioned something that I felt like very similar to, which was you said that you first started with computer science when you went to college, and you, because you didn't see art as a career path necessarily. And I had the same experience. I was actually going to school for business, because for the same reason, I was like, I don't see what exactly I could do with an art degree. So what was your thought process about that, and how did you decide to ultimately do art?
Yeah, so I don't know, sometimes when I look back at that, I'm just like, oh God, I just stumbled into everything I've done. And how do I make that into a fun journey? And sometimes it's just, that's it, that's your journey, and I try not to overdo it. But yeah, like you were saying, school, I didn't see the arts. Well, I think what happened is I was discouraged. My grandmother's a painter, my dad's a musician, and they weren't the most well off, right? And growing up, seeing what a life insurance agent / bluegrass musicians, my dad, growing up, seeing that kind of story, and then seeing my grandmother, who really painted as a hobby, even though she could have pursued it as a career, to be honest, but she was discouraged too. And so hearing these two sort of being my dad and grandmother, and I don't think they remember this, to be honest. So if they hear this, and they're gonna go, what the what? I don't remember saying that, but I remember it. It was like a stab in the heart, because growing up, I was drawing, honestly, anime. I wanted to be a manga artist. I wanted to do comics. I was growing up mostly reading Japanese manga more than American comics. And I used to draw comics in high school, even though I was never in an art class. I was actually in orchestra. I was doing violin at the time. And, first violin, second to last chair, though. So I remember having these conversations when I did music in high school, middle school, high school, and I was like, yeah, I don't think there's a future for me here, but really my passion, I just want to draw comics. I want to draw things inspired by manga. And when I was telling my grandmother and my dad, and they both told me separate times, and still a stab in the heart here, they were like, I don't see you having a career in the arts. I don't see you making money doing this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, I'll just do data entry, I guess. That seems like the move. Yeah. And then I found out I sucked at it. I sucked really bad. And I took accounting twice. And the professor at the time was just like, yeah, maybe this isn't, you're not cut out for this.
Something that just doesn't, really have much, room for creativity. Some jobs,
right.
Jobs you can insert creativity, here and there. But that one sounds like there's not much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking dollar signs at the time. But then then I was like, dang, okay, I need to quit messing up. I need to do something that I'm more into. And then I was like, you know what? I played the violin for quite a bit. And so I remember to this day, I think about this email. I emailed one of the professors at the music department and said, hey, how do I apply to be in the music department? And I remember it because he goes in the email, you don't just apply, you audition. And then like listed all these things that I was supposed to know, and I was like, dang, I know those, but I didn't practice those. And I'm trying to get back in school, and so I said, screw it, I'll just do art. Yeah. So I go to Columbus State University around 2006, 2007. I don't know why my memory is so murky now. I guess it's been a while. But and I was like in my mind, okay, there's no illustration, there's no comic, there's really, I mean, other than Orion Wirtz, who probably could have shown me some things, but you know, he was teaching painting.
That's what I was. One of the professors what I thought too. I thought about Orion, yeah.
Yeah, but I think what happened is this person who ended up becoming my mentor, Michael McFalls, was my 3D design professor, and he showed me the world of sculpture, and he showed me, you know, Marcel Duchamp, showed me Rauschenberg, John, God, what's the guy who did the American flags? Jasper Johns. Sorry, Jasper John fans. And you know, I was looking at Franz West, and a couple more artists. Richard Tuttle, I have to throw him out there, and Bruce Nauman. Bruce Nauman really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And so, I almost like that meme where it's like they're holding two things and they're like inspired manga things or fine arts, and I just drop the manga. It's like, I think I'm gonna go down this fine art world. This seems pretty fine to me. So that's how I got to where I'm at. Well, that's part of the story, how I got into art.
Yeah.
And to appreciate it. And then,
Yeah, and so my experience at CSU was that they encouraged a lot of experimentation. So you got into sculpture, but I guess you also probably experimented with a lot of different media, right?
Yes. I remember, like, I was upsetting some of my fellow college colleagues because I was doing advanced sculpture, but primarily doing videos.
Okay.
But I was doing video installations, so I was engaging space, but not in what they thought they were doing or what they thought they needed to do. Part of, I think, I was in an English class, and one of the professors says, you know, one of the best papers you could ever write is if it's the opposition. You know, take something that everyone, like, you could write, say, like I did this in an art history class. I wrote a paper about why don't we just like burn the historical paintings? Let's just make room for new paintings. Because I was like, I'm going to try to do the opposition. Everyone's going to be writing like, oh, it's so important, we have to keep it. And then, but I'm like, you know how much paintings and artwork is stored in boxes and museums and never see the light of day and take up space. And if there's so much space for us new artists to try to occupy, there's going to be none. There's going to be no space for us, right? And so that was my whole thing. And I made a B. I was like, all right, maybe I was a little too harsh on the Mona Lisa. That's what the subject of the painting was. But, I just... so the opposition here. So I was like, what? So I'm doing sculpture. Why don't I do sculpture? Mm-hmm. Why don't I find another way? I don't do welding. I'd done it, but, you know, video just seemed like the funny part to do. And one thing I want to point out there, like, I was also very inspired by the comedian, performance artist, oh my god, I hate when my brain, it's like, I'm going to bring it up, then I forget it. What's his name? Andy Kaufman. I was really into Andy Kaufman, and so at that time, I was very, like, trying to be funny, and try to do things that sort of make people scratch their heads, like, why are you doing that? And so Andy Kaufman was like my spirit animal. And so, yeah, I thought it'd be funny to do advanced sculpture, but primarily do video art. And it was making A's. And I think that's why people were getting upset. They were like, what? I, like, spent 40 hours making this metal sculpture, and I got a B or a C. And yet this guy just went, filmed something with a crappy camera, and got an A. What the hell?
Yeah, but that's how it is. It's the thought that counts.
Yeah. Yes, right. And I think that's what helped me engage the work. Engage like how people see the art. You could spend so long making something, and it can be evident. You could look at it and go, okay, I know someone spent 100 or plus hours on that. And then sometimes you can't tell. Nor people care. Sometimes people, you have 2 seconds statistically to capture someone's attention,
right,
before they just go cool, walk off. And I think that was something that I was hoping to do with these video pieces of mine, was to capture your attention. Because reading about Bill Viola or even in music, and I guess music comes back to me sometimes, is that you occupy time. You have, say, typically 3 minutes. A song has verse, chorus, if you want to go into pop kind of format. And then, so you need a hook, something to catch them, or a progression. You go through this time. Where I think paintings or art, they're stagnant and still. Visually, they're telling a story, but you have to somehow grab their attention, right? And have them explore up and down. And I think that's what video does. But video, I think, follows the same, not entirely, but follows the same kind of logic music does, because it occupies its time. Say a 3-minute video, you have to capture someone's attention. So I did this one piece that Mike McFalls really loved, my mentor. It was called The Identical Pickle. And he still brings it up to this day. And I went and bought the worst camera you could buy, digital camera. And I was just learning green screen. And I filmed this pickle. It's say right here.
Yeah. And
then the title will appear, and even the worst Apple fonts, right, from a iMovie, and then it says Identical Pickle, and it just sits there, and you don't see another pickle. And then in the most basic, worst green screen you could ever see, another pickle appears, and it's the same pickle. I just moved it over, and so I called it. And it was just the payoff. Was it worth it? Or was it really worth it if that's your jam?
So was there a sound element? Was it?
Nope.
No sound element.
It was just you're just looking at a really bad video of a pickle. Yeah. That promises to show an identical pickle, and it was just the same.
The same exact one.
And I think that's, because I think it's what was interested at the time was holding your attention long enough to have a unsatisfactory end, right? You're just oh, okay, thanks, I guess, and you walk off. Yeah. And that's, for me as the artist, that's what I was into. I was more into holding your attention and make you feel like you may have wasted your time, or maybe if you just like the absurdity of it, it was worthwhile.
So what?
Like I did a.
So wait. So tell me more about like. So why did you choose a pickle, and why? And then tell me what the positive critique you received from your mentor about it as well.
I think it's just I had a pickle in front of me. I don't know. I somehow had a pickle in front of me, and I thought I will record this. And I think the title "Identical Pickle" is just the way the words sound and flow together. Stuck with me, and I was like, I have to do this. I have to film this, and I have to put together. So the critique really was just filled with laughter. You know, like, you're an idiot. Like, that's what Mike always says all the time, because I always bring him, like, dumb ideas. But he usually says it in a way that I can tell he appreciates it, but it's that kind of, you're an idiot. What the hell are you doing? Why are you doing
But he
this?
loves that one.
But he loved it, yeah.
Okay.
And I find out that he uses it for examples for students, a lot. And I did another series called, I think it was my reply to oh my God, I'm going to butcher her name. Marina Abramovich.
Yeah.
The artist is present.
Yes.
I like the idea of it, but I thought the sensational part of it was the best part and the dumbest. I wasn't like a big fan of the piece. I'm just going to have this artist who just sit here and stare at you. Like, I don't know, I need a little more than that. But at the same time, if you're a fan of her work, which I am a huge fan of her work, my favorite piece is like where she and her partner were holding a bow and arrow and together, right? A bow, and one was holding the arrow, and it builds this tension. It's just
it's funny because I like that one as well, but I actually like The Artist is Present a little better, because I actually think the one you're talking about with the bow and arrow, like that one it's like, for me, really obvious, and it's kind of like one of those, like, you look at it and you get it. It's instant, right? And The Artist is Present, that one was like, there was this sensational aspect about it, obviously, because she's so famous. That is like, it's just a circumstance of the fact that she's such a famous person and she was there. But I feel like there was a quietness to that piece, like if you ignore that it's because she's so famous. There was like this quiet subtlety to it, that, if another artist was to replicate that, like, as a way to like honor that piece or whatever, but someone who's not so famous, then that sort of quiet beauty of it would be preserved, or maybe better highlighted, because I agree, like, the sensational aspect of like, oh, she's here is probably overshadowing that piece, just like the perception you got was. But it's interesting.
And I think, right, her notoriety for her work and her her career is like the culmination. All of it had led to this point. And I remember when that was happening, I think I was more of a hot-headed person, It's just like, whatever, You're looking at those at the top, and you're like, screw you. So, granted, I think I have that little mentality, and I think it still stays just a little bit. But, yes, I think I think it can be a very beautiful piece, and especially in a way where, like, the intimacy of you being with the person who created it. Because, like, when you look at a piece of art, You have 2 seconds to care or not. Then you also have, because they're not present, you could say whatever you want, You could be like, oh yeah, this is cool or this is crap. But when the artist is there, and I've been in situations where but I've been where I'm standing next to my piece and someone doesn't know I'm the artist. And then, after like maybe 10 compliments, one person comes and says something snarky. And then you're just like, why'd you say that?
And that's always the one that you remember as the artist.
That's the one.
That's the one that you remember, yeah, which sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so performance pieces though, like I did this one piece as sort of like to respond to her piece. I decided to just lay on a pedestal and being like,
okay.
It was just like artist on a pedestal, just like a little wordplay, and then I started to like ram myself into white walls, trying to like break free of the white cube, and or I've had like a friend of mine drag me all around the floor, like I'm an art piece. So this is like, the Bruce Nauman inspired stuff coming out of me as a reply to the artist is present. I also like Jay-Z's kind of lackluster homage to it, because he did one that's called "A Rapper Is Present," but whereas
I don't know, I didn't know about that.
Whereas she sits on the chair for hours. I will say I will acknowledge she sat there for hours, and stayed there, and it was, and that can be taxing to a person too. Whereas Jay-Z, like, someone had to throw him a bottle of water and take frequent breaks. So I don't know. I think it's that kind of Jay-Z's replying to her.
What did Jay-Z do? Was he just there? What was his?
He just rapped for hours,
okay.
But would take breaks in between. Whereas she didn't. She sat there for so long. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so like moving on. I mean, I guess before I move on, did you feel like those experiences in college? Did you feel that space to kind of practice and experiment really helped you with your work, or did you feel like it was actually stifling? Or, I mean, what was your overall experience?
I think my overall experience was great. It helped me because I think I came in with a different goal, and I ended up having different goals and dropped old ones and evolved, and it gave me time to play. It gave me time to just figure out what I want to do. But I think near the end, once I started to graduate and I started to no longer exist in the school bubble, and student loans is creeping down the door, and then I have to sustain a living more than I did in school. I think then that's when I start to really stifle my work, and I start to think, okay, how do I sell dumb ideas? And then I start to look at work that seems to sell and be more sellable, and then I start to, I think, sterilize myself. And I went through a period where I started to really just but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people see art is like that romantic, like, oh, it struck the moment and I have to draw what's in my heart. Like, no, you don't have to. You can. That's cool. I love that. But also, you could create a business from it, and you can if you could find, you have to be a salesman, I guess, a salesperson, and be able to sell these ideas, but you have to have a product that can sell. And I went through a period where I was just like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. how do I sell the idea that I'm going to, so I did a piece where I cut carrots for 30 minutes and I looped it. So I'm hoping your attention span doesn't allow you to spot the loop, and then I just make a boring video of me cutting carrots. Like, okay, does that really get me anywhere? But then at that time, I got an email from either, I can't remember if it was Mike or Joe Sanders, who was the former chair of the art department at Columbus State, was telling me about a place called Pasaquan had started a restoration project underneath the Kohler Foundation.
Pasaquan was created by Eddie Owens Martin, born in rural Georgia in 1908. Feeling out of place in his conservative hometown, he ventured to New York City at 14, immersing himself in its vibrant culture. In 1935, during an illness, Eddie had a vision that led him to adopt the name Saint Ohm and founded a new religion. In 1956, he returned to Georgia, where he dedicated himself to creating Pasaquan, a unique art environment blending diverse cultural symbols. Today, Pasaquan stands as a significant art site in the U.S., listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
And the Kohler Foundation is the toilet fixtures, faucets.
That's what. So I was reading about that, and I was like, Kohler Foundation, like, what? Is that an arts foundation or what? And then, okay, so I'm glad you mentioned what it is.
Yeah. So Kohler is, so you have the Kohler Company, which is the company, right? That's the one that you probably have used their products when you go to a restroom somewhere, or you may even have their products themselves and didn't really think about it. And then the foundation was created by Ruth Kohler, who wanted to preserve art environments throughout the United States. Started out mostly in Wisconsin, and then branched out to different states with other art environments, and work with the stewards there, and restore the sites, work with artists, art conservators from all over to fix these places, and then engage the nearby communities, try to change the way people perceive them, in terms of, like, if they, like, say Pasaquan, people saw this as like a hippie commune, work at the devil, depending on who or what you politically aligned yourself with, I guess, or your viewpoints. And so Kohler does the work and restore these sites, and I interned for them, and I for 2 years worked at this art site called Pasaquan, Pasaquan, built by the artist Eddie Owens Martin, who had a crazy life. Sex worker, drug dealer, drag queen, Southern cooker in New York. He originally from Georgia, ran away to New York, and had these visions of this tribe, of these people consisting of all religions and cultures, all living in harmony in the future, and then came back to Georgia after inheriting this land from his mother in Buena Vista, Georgia. They say Buena Vista.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And, and his legacy to this day still resonates with so many people. And I'm, working on a site. I get to intimately take it apart, put it back together. I met these art conservators, and I started thinking, ooh, this could be a cool career path, like art conservation, until I saw how much chemistry I had to know. And then I was like, okay,
that's true,
if that's what I have to do. But then, out of luck, I applied for to be a caretaker as a transitional job, because I was like, after we're done working on it, several $1 million later, everyone's moving off to the next project, and I'm like, okay, I don't have another project lined up just yet, so I applied to caretake and be there for about a year or two, and then move on. And then that sort of became molded me to be the artist that I am today, really. Because now I have an income. I work in the art field. I sort of like run a museum in a way with Michael McFalls, who's now the director of Pasaquan and Bill Bartlett Art Center. Yeah, and we have an artist residency program, so I get to meet artists from around the world. And what's great about Pasaquan is that I'm in the middle of nowhere for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's kind of off the beaten path in a way, right? But
but what's great is that they come to me,
yeah.
right? And then they're alone.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll meet all these artists, curators, movie actors or whatever, musicians, and I get to have conversations with people who travel the world and see things differently, and I get to meet people who are inspired by Eddie Martin and his legacy.
Wait, so let's go back for a second with so you got introduced to Pasaquan through this internship that you did for Kohler, right?
Well, it wasn't the first time I was introduced. Okay. In 2009, my dad, I mentioned, is a musician, right?
Yeah.
And he is an amazing musician. He's like toured with several like bands, played music festivals around the regions, and he, really anywhere, like even his music's played at different places, but he like different countries, but he used to take me out to Pasaquan when he would perform with a bluegrass band. And I remember, because I think I was hot-headed still, I was in a different mindset. I'm like into metal and punk music, and all of a sudden I'm listening to bluegrass, and I'm in this kind of what I thought was a hippie hangout. Pasaquan. I was like, all right, whatever, and I dismissed it.
Yeah, because I think I read somewhere that you didn't like the first time you went there, you didn't like it that much, right?
I wasn't in love with it.
Right.
I think I was appreciate the scale, but I think I was a little, for a college person, a little angsty at the time. But then the second time, I went back next year, and I got asked to perform music there. I was at the time doing some like experimental, or I call it experimental electronic music. Some people call it noise, and so I played it there, and this guy was like, "Do you know the story of Pasaquan?" And I said, "No, tell me about it." And he told me about Eddie Martin's life and how he lived in New York, and he was inspired by all these different cultures and religions, and him as an artist struggled to be recognized, and as I'm sitting there thinking and looking at the architecture, the intentionality of all his designs, and how everything worked together and flowed together, and that's like four and a half acres of art working together.
Yeah, so tell me really quick, like your first impression of when you went there, not that you didn't like it, but like visually, just so people understand, because it's such a cool place from photos, and it's really, it's so unique, like it's very hard to imagine unless you look at the photos. So just like explain what that looks like, what it is, and what he did, and then also why he did it, because it's all very interesting.
So when you're out in Buena Vista, and you stumble, imagine you're someone who's never really looked at art, never really, I don't know, just not exposed to it as often, and you're driving in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden you stumble upon like a very bright, colorful place, concrete art painted in like mostly primary colors, but they like work together and they vibrate, and then you're seeing symbols from around the world, Southeastern African, Mesoamerican, Southeastern Asian, just all Native American, all these influences, all these symbols, all in one place, and it just sort of sticks with you. I mean, sort of contradicting myself, saying, "Oh, at first I didn't care," but I think it's because I was there with my dad. You know, it was like, yeah,
I mean, it's like you changed so
cool
much from a college student to like later. I mean, you changed so much as a person that it's like understandable, I think. But it's like.
But.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, it's just it catches you off guard, you know. And I have people who will drive from Atlanta, Athens, New York. I've had families from Japan and India come out there, and I think it's always the drive. I think the drive helps, you know, because they're like, all right, are we about to get lost? What's going? And then bam, you're at Pasaquan, and it's just I've seen people's jaws just drop to the floor. I've heard so many different like reactions, mostly positive, of people saying that like they can't help but feel joy when they see the site. And that kind of stuff resonates with me, because when you're there almost every day, it becomes normal. But then people come and remind you why it's amazing and why I should continue to love it, right? So.
And you've been there now, is it 9 years?
About 9 years now, yeah.
Okay, and you're the groundskeeper, right? So and you're also like the curator of exhibitions, I read, correct?
It's more of a collaboration. So my title now is project coordinator, because I now have interns out there. I'm showing them the stuff that I learned under Kohler, but I've also, Mike sometimes will collaborate with a curator. He's curated. I've done a couple of curations, and I sort of like that kind of collaborative nature of Pasaquan. If someone has a cool idea and we like it, we work with them. Like recently, we had the Fuel and Lumber Company from Birmingham out there, and they are a curatorial collective. Partnership between Amy Pleasant and Pete Schultz, and they go and curate shows, and they were very interested in Pasaquan because one, his story, two, they see so many elements of Eddie in other people's art, because Eddie is always, you'll hear this term all the time, Eddie Owens Martin, also known as Saint Ohm, the creator of Pasaquan, is that he was ahead of his time. You know, he created these androgynous, gender fluid kind of beings in the future. These ideas were very progressive for his time, you know, everyone coexisting in harmony, and he was creating these kind of like sci-fi elements in the 30s and 40s while living in New York, off the streets of Greenwich Village, and openly queer, drag queen, constantly running from the cops, and then comes back to Georgia to build this place, right? So like his story was a big inspiration for these collaborative projects for these folks. So so we work with Fuel and Lumber Company. We brought out artists to respond to Eddie or others who sort of answered some other similar cosmic call, and they call the show Unstuck in Time because when they curated the show and we worked on the layout, we wanted to kind of make it hard for you to figure out who's who. And if Eddie, especially Eddie, try to figure out who's Eddie, you know, and show that his work is timeless. It's unstuck in time. It's so that kind of like fun kind of curation of his work with contemporary artists is something that I'm very interested in, you know, because one, we try to push Eddie's legacy as far as we can, and usually it's through collaboration. We just had an artist, Joshua Michele Ross from Oakland. He's a sound artist. He recorded sounds all over Pasaquan, and then had this kind of part ASMR, part guided meditation, part collaborative orchestra of sounds, participatory orchestra, where every sound was mapped to a button, and we were giving it out to different visitors, and they listened to him and guide him through the sounds of Pasaquan, and then like allowed them to create music together just with sounds, and with little to no instructions at the end, and recorded that. And now people have, especially if you were there, you have a moment that you maybe have known nobody in that room, but you got to know people through sound.
Yeah.
And it's through sounds of Pasaquan.
So Pasaquan now, it's like, from what I read online of what you've told me already, it is a place where you're preserving his work, his artwork, but also it's a place where a lot of other artists come and can respond with their work, or, you know, assist in preserving his work, right? And so did he build the actual structure, or how much of it did he build versus how much of it was there? And I mean, because I see the paintings and the patterns, and so I know he painted these beautiful murals and all over the place, but how much of it was already there built?
So the main house, you'll see, when you look at pictures of Pasaquan, you'll see yellow sidings on the wall. That is the main house. He did add rooms to it. The front room of the house was the front porch. Added side porches, and then there was... so the house, I just want to point out, it's also shaped, or it references anatomy. It's a large phallic object.
Okay.
And so you'll have the barn house, and then you have like a shed. And then he just connects the two, creates this round room called the oratory, and it's very phallic. But then when you go into the main entrance, it's shaped like this, right, to the side. So it's almost like you're entering a vessel. And so when you enter Pasaquan, you're like entering his body. You're entering the body of the artist. And so... But all that was addition. So I would say, if I were to give a number, a rough estimate, I would say 80% of all that you see at Pasaquan is all created by him and his crew. And yes, I said crew. He did hire people. He paid them mostly young black men from the town of Buena Vista. I'll switch back and forth. And he paid them $10 an hour to work there. He also hired women to sew fashion ideas he had, handbags, ponchos. He was employing people, and that was, I think, an amazing thing that Eddie was able to do, to be, and again, quote unquote, middle of nowhere, lived a lifestyle that was outside the norm of society at the time. It did bring about some strife, some conflict, you know. People used to sneak into the property, break parts of the walls.
Really?
A couple of his dogs were shot and killed, yeah. And so I could go on a little bit about how he, you know, countered that. He would tell folks he could summon snakes to attack people who came from to do damage to the work. He could summon snakes to attack them. He had 2 giant German shepherds. He trained to chase people off if he didn't like them. He even told folks, I can summon, or I could put a curse on you and your family if you came to put harm upon us. So like, it's sort of weird. Like he was like the witch doctor, fortune teller, artist in the small town of Buena Vista.
There's so much history in that, and all the work that goes with preserving and stuff. So what is your day-to-day over there? Like what do you...
Usually the day-to-day for me is like open the gates, open it. So okay, there's days where open to the public.
Do you live on site? Or do you live here?
Yes.
You do? Okay, cool.
Well, it's more so off and on now. I think I now have a house that I bought in Columbus.
Oh, cool.
And so it's more of a studio space for me now.
Cool.
The back room. So what I do is I tend to... So I cut the grass. I make sure everything looks tip-top perfect shape. I check for any kind of degradation in the walls or the building. If I see paint chipping off, we figure out what to do with that. And then those are usually on the days I'm off. So we're closed, but the days we're open to the public, it's I greet people, I give tours, I talk about Eddie and his art, and then I now have interns, so we go about learning different processes of like mostly surface level or of restoration work on the walls and repainting the place. I teach them like this paint you should use here, this paint you should not. This kind of adhesive is good for this adhesive is good for that, stuff like that. So one thing about Pasaquan is like I wear a lot of hats, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a tour guide, I'm a repairman, the gardener, the whatever. I just make sure that place is standing and engage people. And then sometimes like I had a curator of the Atlanta airport come by, and I was like, okay, maybe this could be a cool idea. I put the idea, I was like, hey, if you're interested, we would love to have Eddie Martin in the airport, the international airport in Atlanta. And a year later, he says, hey, y'all still interested? And
Cool.
And so then I become an art handler. Then I have to pack up art, and then I send it to people. But yeah, am I tired? Constantly. But do I love it? Yes.
Yeah. So how does that being like basically immersed in his art, literally, how does that impact your own work? And then also the process of constantly restoring and showing his work. I mean, does that to some extent kind of bleed into your own art practice in a way, like where they just sort of mend together and you kind of feel like it's part of your practice as well? Or do you actually like consciously try to separate the two mentally in order to kind of, I don't know, create work from a certain place in your mind that isn't influencing you? Or do you like invite the influence?
In the beginning, I try to separate it. I remember people kept going like, man, your art's gonna get so colorful, and my art was already colorful. I was using bright colors, and in my sculpture work, in my video art, I even did this thing called video paintings at the time.
Yeah.
And I just kept going like, no, it's not. I'm gonna go black and white now. So I guess it inspired me to go a different avenues.
That's the opposition mentality.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started drawing more black and white drawings of these shapes, but I noticed, and then this is to go back to that kind of, what am I doing after I graduate, and trying to figure out who I am now, right? Because you spend 4 years doing this, and then after that, you're like, I'm a different person now, like you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to set perimeters. I thought black and white would be a good place to start over, but I started to draw these kind of like weird, not so perfect shapes, and then I would fill them up with the tiniest circles I can do. And I was thinking about like the sand mandalas, because you're there at Pasaquan, you see mandalas everywhere, and how they're ephemeral. You could destroy them after you're done, right? It's all about the process of letting go. But I'm an artist, so I'm not gonna let go. I put all that hours in. I want to show it, right?
Yeah.
So I started to fill up these planes, if you will, with these tiny circles, the tiniest circles I can draw. My face is literally against, because I didn't have and I still don't. I don't know why I'm dumb in that way. But I still get up into the art and I draw the tiniest circles over and over and over and over. And I noticed that my hand is doing all the work and my mind is free to just wander. And so, in a way, it's like automatic drawing, but not entirely. But it allowed my brain to think, and so the art became more of a cathartic kind of way of me making something, rediscovering myself, but also therapy. It allowed me to think about, like, okay, Charles, let's address that time you felt uncomfortable. And then I'll go, no, podcast time. Click, listen to music, distract myself.
Right.
But it's still, I think it helped me, because at that time in my life, I felt isolated from the rest of the world. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, surrounded by a heavy legacy of an artist. You can't escape it. It's inescapable, especially if you're living in a building he built. And but it helped me just go through a process of rediscovery and what kind of artist I want to be. And so meditation became a big component to it. I think I haven't checked the doctor yet, but I've been feeling like I might have ADHD, and the kind of I can't sit down long enough. I'm fidgeting all the time, and I want to move, and so the idea of doing repetitious mark making over and over and over sounds infuriating to me. But I do it because I want it to challenge myself, and that challenge is I get these beautiful ink drawings of like a gradient of mark making. So sometimes when what dictates is just like how tired my hand gets, or if there's a moment I'm thinking a little too much about something and I get a little angry or I get a little sad, or even just the pen running out of ink, and it creates this beautiful kind of like of gradient values in the grayscale, right?
Right.
And I just fell in love with them. But now they hurt my wrist too much, so then I switched over to a different mark making, and I started to do more painting. And I was looking at the artist Hiroki Dio. He's a Japanese artist. Was a former chef. His brother died, and it put him in a kind of depressive state and made him question his life. And he started drawing these circle drawings. So, but instead of like creating a boundary where I did, he just filled up these giant, like 8-foot long pieces of paper with these beautiful circles, and he talks about how he's pulling from the void, the source, if you will, and he's pulling something out. He's conjuring something to appear. And so that idea was cool with me, so I started to think about that more as I do these repetitious mark making, and I wanted to create art that sort of feels like it's pulling you in or something's coming out. And just through the kind of black and white, and now I'm introducing color. For some reason, red and blue is just my favorite color combination.
Yeah.
And I like the way it vibrates. I like the way, like Eddie Martin's work. So Eddie Martin, I can't get away from his work, so I started to incorporate it, like the flatness.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
colors.
there is like I can see some. I don't even want to say similarities, but I mean I guess similarities, but it's not in any way that feels like repetitive or that feels like you know, like you're looking at a source and like copying something. It feels nothing like that at all, but there's this appreciation for mark making and an appreciation for repetition and for that sort of flat space that I could see with both. And also I wanted to mention there's I saw on your website there's some really beautiful sculptures, and I thought the idea behind them was really beautiful too. And I'm looking at the name because I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget, but you called it the transference of energy, and they're the hands that are sculptures that are kind of like in a circle, and then they have the marks going around. And those are they're very beautiful, and they're very captivating too. So, and they're kind of similar to your paintings in in the mark making. They're there's that similarity too.
So the transference of energy was like sort of just me trying to make sense of how I'm doing. So in 2018, I was hit up by Karen Patterson, who was the curator at the John Michael Kohler Art Center. And so that's part of the Kohler family too. So you have Foundation, John Michael Kohler, Ruth Arts, Art Preserve, all these folks. And Karen Patterson, an amazing curator, amazing person. And not just because she, asked me to do this, but just in general, like just looking at her career, you're just like, damn, wow, that's amazing. She reached out to me and said, hey, Saya Wolfach, who's also an artist who I highly admire. I love Saya's work, and just to have the chance to assist her, that was the opportunity. It's like Karen said, hey, Saya's working on this, but she needs assistance. Would you like to do it? And I immediately was like, yes. And they flew me out to Wisconsin. I was in the Kohler factory. I was in the ceramic factory, and I was working on these pieces for Saya, and I got to work on my own work. And I just kept thinking, like, how did I get here? Like, I didn't apply. I honestly did not think if I were to apply, this would be years later when I'm more established and had a more concrete voice. And I just kept thinking, it's all thanks to Eddie, and thanks to everybody who is connected to Eddie. And so that's where the transference of energy title came from. The center of the piece, where all the hands are touching, that circle around it, are all the hands of people who were affected by the legacy of Eddie Owens Martin. And I'm one of the hands, and I wanted to pay homage to the very person that, I should say 3 or 4 people really who affected my life. It was, Eddie Martin, Ruth Kohler, and Michael McFalls, and I guess I'll put Joe Sanders there. He was a very nice, positive energy. And then a long list of other people. But those 4, that's felt like I should pay some homage to, um, especially definitely Eddie and how he's affected other people's lives just because. And that's one thing I think. I'm back and forth. I think sometimes art can be a waste of space because I try to think of sustainability of the world and our responsibilities as creators. But at the same time, there are some things that you, as an artist, you may not see at all. And then sometimes when a piece of art of yours is hanging in someone's house, it affects them. It affects them in a way that's positive, hopefully, or evokes some kind of emotion, or in the case of Eddie Martin, he employed people. He if it wasn't for him building the site, the people he employed wouldn't have made some kind of living, and then two, those who preserved the site, this is now their job. It created jobs. It created this kind of cascading kind of tangible legacy. Effect. And so that's where transference of energy came from. I just wanted to pay homage to that. Just say, hey, thank you, Eddie. And Saya too. I mean, Saya was an amazing artist, or is an amazing artist. If you're ever in Seattle, go to the Seattle Museum of Art. She has a permanent exhibition there. She has a TED Talk. It was funny hearing her talk about filming the TED Talk while I was there because I never got to know. I always wondered what the process was like for a TED Talk presenter, So she shared that with me, and it was a fun talk. And she's a very still to this day
I've heard
inspirational person.
On that point, I've heard that it's like pretty rough to do the TED Talk. Like it's like they really critique you. I was listening. I don't remember who the person was that was talking about their TED Talk, but it was someone who did one, and they were saying like they had this great talk and they submitted it and they were like sure that people were gonna love it, and they got just like this long list of red. No, you gotta do it like this. Like I heard it was pretty brutal.
It is. I was saying it. I was like, ooh, maybe I'll soften it. What Saya said to me, because she was like, there's a formula. They have a formula, a template that you have to follow, and it can rub people off the wrong way. And I definitely thought it definitely made Saya annoyed. But I think her TED Talk was still great. But to know the behind the scenes, just to be like, oh yeah. That's how she really felt, though. But yes, I've heard that too. TED Talks, like they have a template you have to.
And it's kind of like it's kind of evident in when you watch them that people are following a formula, but it's not too obvious. But I guess that's what makes that talk their talk. Like they've got some formula down that you have to know.
And then to give them some fairness, I guess sometimes, when you think you have gold and someone says, actually, they have like a different opinion, you're like, come on.
So tell me about what upcoming projects, is there any upcoming events at Pasaquan that you're working on? And also, are there any personal projects or exhibitions or anything of the sort that you're doing with your personal work at the moment that you have upcoming?
Yeah. So right now with Pasaquan, I think we're in the talks of doing some kind of art festival. Just basically bring out a bunch of similar-minded artists and have them sell art there. Create some kind of community amongst each other, because I think I did this thing called Pasafest, and it was a music festival, art festival, and it was mostly a fundraiser to preserve Pasaquan, but also celebrate his St. Elmo's legacy. But it just got too big. The price to do it was just too high. We made money because luckily Mike is amazing with grants, and most of our expenses are paid with grants, so all we really do is make profit. But we could probably make more profit if we reposition it. So I was thinking, what is there a way to have two positives? Preserve legacy of Eddie Martin, but also, like, give artists a chance to to sell and also communicate with each other, and get them together, and maybe we'll bring artists from, say, Nashville, and an artist from Columbus to come and perform or to sell work. Hopefully mingle, get to know each other, and then if they do an art market in Nashville, they have people they know, and I want to, in a way, it's small, I understand, but at the same time, it goes a long way, especially those who really want to push their work further and be a part of something, and some kind of art community. So that's one thing. The other is just finish up our restoration that we're currently doing, and then just hopefully find more artists. I'm trying to beef up our artist residency program so people can apply.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. What does that entail for an artist?
So at the time, right now, if you go to the website, pasaquan.columbusstate.edu, there's an artist residency program with a little form there. And it just tells you what we, would like. First, whatever work you do, it has to somehow have some kind of way to incorporate Eddie Martin. You don't have to be like, this is Eddie Martin plastered everywhere, right? You don't have to. You just find what you, as an artist, what you do with the way you create, but also find a way to engage the legacy of Pasaquan and Eddie Martin. Like I mentioned, that curatorial group with their show Unstuck in Time, Joshua Michaele Ross, the sound artist. Or if you want to be literal, we had a composer stay out there and compose a 45-minute opera all about the life of Eddie. There just has to find a way to incorporate Pasaquan without, and then, or if you just have such a cool idea and we love it and want to find a way to facilitate it, if we have the means, we want to do it. So yeah, there's multiple ways to apply, but we're in the process of beefing that out so that we can actually start bringing more people and engage. And then for personal, I do this thing on the side with a small group in Columbus called Artists Anonymous, and I was a lot more active before the lockdowns, but we're starting to pick up again. I think everyone we had to deal with life first, and now we're bringing artists back, and I sort of how like I see Pasaquan, where I want to bring artists who feel like they like in the art market they could build a community. I remember in Columbus, like there's communities, but they're so far apart, and I wanted to. The whole point of Artists Anonymous was to help bring them all, bridge the gap in an eclectic group of artists, no matter if it's ceramic, surrealist, real, whatever. They all can coexist together. So we're putting together a show with the help of Hannah Israel called Big Time, and it features some of probably my biggest piece I've ever made. I actually made a big painting for it this time around.
Oh, cool.
So I'm excited about that.
How big is it?
But yeah, that's just 4x6, I believe.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get bigger. Like, I've never done a big painting. I've always done like big sculptures that then I have to destroy because where am I gonna put it? Where am I gonna store it? So, but yeah, and yep. And so to keep making, so Pasaquan takes a lot of my time, but I'm hoping that I create a new body of work that I could help exhibit elsewhere, and I too could start pushing my own art career a little further than now. But yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. With me, I am. I'm working on a number of just paintings for. There's a group show in Atlanta that I'm doing right now, and
Nice.
There's a group show that will be up in London that is next month in July, which I think will be cool. So I just finished that. I just finished packing these 5 big paintings, and
Yeah.
so then
Are you going out to London?
I'm not, because I am going to Italy this summer, and for a separate for a family vacation. And so going to London would be too close to that. It would be less than a month apart or something. And so it was just I was hoping that the two could overlap so that I could go do a stop in London and then go where we're planning to, but it doesn't work out with the time. But I will have a group show there, and then I just work on just specific project-based work. But
That's amazing.
I mean, just same old, nothing. I mean, and then there's this podcast that I'm doing, which is, this is relatively new to me. I mean, it's not new in the sense that I started it actually last year, so it's not new I just started, but it's been one of those things that I have had, it's been one of those things where it's first of all, you have to figure out how everything works. You have to figure out what to use. You have to figure out how to set it up. And then you have to figure out, there's just so many things to figure out. And then it kept, I kept having stuff come on top and pile up. But anyway, so, but yeah, there's that, and just, the regular stuff. Nothing. I mean, just painting, really. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's
Cool.
good. I mean, I would love to. I have actually some kind of experimental work going on in the background. I have some ideas for kind of cutting my canvases up, but then presenting them in a sculptural way, which this is very much just only in my head. I haven't done anything to produce this. I suffer from the you have a million ideas and I can sort of have enough bandwidth to accomplish 10% of one idea or something, and then it goes in the timeout area, and then I have to do the stuff that's mandatory, and then I can come back to the stuff that's just for fun. But it's all under the umbrella of my art practice, so it's not too random. Does that make sense? Okay, well, I think that is a great place to end, and thank you so much for telling me about your work and telling me about Pasaquan. I think many people might not know about Pasaquan, so they'll be inspired to check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and share my story and Eddie Owens Martin's story, and yeah, I appreciate this a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.